Honestly, why do they even allow babies in business class? The shrill voice of a blonde woman, her neck adorned with a pearl necklace worth more than most people's monthly salary, rang out clearly in the cabin that had gone as quiet as a church. She tilted her head to whisper to the man beside her, but it was no whisper at all. Every passenger nearby heard it and seemed to agree. They didn't speak, but their heads turned their eyes sharp like they were witnessing something inappropriate that needed to be removed. Near the back row, Ariana Monroe sat, with her head bowed low, her messy hair hiding the exhaustion in her eyes. In her arms, baby Lyra, just 6 months old, was wailing relentlessly. A tiny cry, yet it pierced through the cabin, filled with expensive perfume and pristine white linens like a blaring siren. Ariana gently rocked her daughter, whispering desperately, "Please, baby girl, please just breathe with me." She had tried everything, soothing, humming lullabies, standing up, sitting down. But Lyra was tired and hungry and overstimulated by the long overnight flight. And Ariana hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours after pulling 3 consecutive shifts at the restaurant just to afford this flight back to New York for her sister's wedding. This plane ticket was supposed to be next month's rent, but she came anyway, because sometimes you need a reason to remind yourself that you're still part of a family, even if you're the forgotten piece. A silver-haired flight attendant approached with a neatly pinned smile, the kind that looked like it was glued on. "Ma'am, we've received complaints. Please keep your baby quiet. Other passengers need to rest." Ariana managed a nod. She didn't want to bother anyone. She didn't want to be here, but she had nowhere else to go. And just as she was about to stand and retreat to the rear lavatory just to cry alone in silence with her child in her arms, a calm, deep voice broke the icy stillness behind her. "She doesn't need to go anywhere. Babies have the right to be tired too." Everyone turned. Ariana did too. And there he was, the man who would change her entire world, with nothing more than a hug. "Babies have the right to be tired too." The words weren't loud, but they cut through the thick air of judgment like a blade. Every eye turned toward the man who had just spoken. He stood, wearing a custom-tailored navy suit, tall and composed with eyes as deep as a midnight lake. He carried a presence that made even the haughty business-class cabin hesitate for a beat. Ariana froze. The man stepped forward, gently lowering himself to her level, his voice calm and soft, like someone who had spent countless nights soothing little ones with a heart that had once been broken. "I'm sorry for the intrusion, but I have some experience with children. My sister has 3. I've stayed up more nights than I care to remember. May I try?" Ariana didn't know why she nodded. Maybe it was the sincerity in his eyes. Maybe it was because she was too exhausted to say no. Maybe it was because, despite how frozen her heart had become from being abandoned, something in her still recognized when kindness was real. She handed Lyra over, carefully, with trembling hands. And then it happened. The miracle. Within a few gentle bounces, Lyra stopped crying. The wailing ceased, replaced by a quivering breath. Then she nestled into his shoulder, her tiny face resting on the chest of a complete stranger, as if she had belonged there all along. For a few seconds, the entire cabin fell into stunned silence. A passenger behind them let out a quiet exhale. A flight attendant placed her hand over her heart, smiling softly. And Ariana, she couldn't speak. She's never calmed like that with anyone. Not even me. The man looked down at the sleeping baby in his arms. He began to hum a soft old melody, one that seemed to soothe not just Lyra, but the shattered pieces of her mother's soul. What's her name, Lyra? Like the constellation. Beautiful. I'm Elijah. Ariana paused. That name. It sounded familiar, maybe from a headline she once skimmed or a charity segment on TV. But right now, all she saw was a stranger holding her child, turning tears into peace, with something she had nearly forgotten: kindness. And for the first time in months, Ariana didn't feel like a burden to the world. She was simply a mother, and she was being heard. The plane had leveled off, cabin lights dimmed, and passengers began settling into the quiet lull of red wine and glossy magazines. But in the back row, there was a small pocket of space, a space where a man still held a sleeping baby, and a young woman sat upright for the first time without feeling guilty. Ariana looked at Elijah. His eyes did not look away from her. No judgment, no feigned empathy like so many others had offered. She turned slightly and whispered, almost like a confession, "I studied communications, but now I work as a waitress at a small restaurant in San Antonio." She didn't say it with regret. There was something else in her voice, something more real, as if she was used to the way people looked at her, with that "what a shame" kind of pity. "I used to think I'd work on major events, do PR for luxury brands, travel the world. So what held you back?" Ariana smiled faintly. Lyra shifted against Elijah's chest, then drifted back to sleep, a warm, soft little soul. Right around the time I realized my godparents weren't going to be around anymore. I got pregnant before I had a steady job, and the man I loved walked out the moment I told him, "I'm carrying your child." Elijah didn't respond right away. No gasp, no "I'm so sorry." Just a quiet nod, like someone who had heard more pain than he cared to recall. "And my sister, the one throwing a huge wedding at the Waldorf Astoria, she told me outright that I'd embarrass the family if I showed up with a fatherless child." Ariana's voice caught at that last word, but not a single tear left her eyes. Elijah simply said one thing, not poetic, not philosophical, but something Ariana would never forget. "I think people only feel shame when they forget they once had a heart." They sat in silence, not out of awkwardness, but because the quiet now felt sacred. The plane continued to glide smoothly above the clouds. Lyra slept peacefully, and Ariana in that moment realized that some men didn't need to say much at all to make a woman feel truly seen. The landing was silent. Elijah continued to hold Lyra patiently until the plane touched down, and Ariana, for the first time in months, felt afraid, afraid to leave this flight, afraid that the peace would shatter, afraid that the warmth in his eyes had only been fleeting. She took Lyra back from Elijah's arms gently, as if returning a precious item that didn't belong to her. "Thank you for everything. I don't know what else to say." Elijah didn't say goodbye. Instead, he handed her a small business card tucked inside the moss green paperback he'd been reading. "If you need a job, or if you just need someone who truly listens." Ariana accepted the card, nodded, and walked away. Lyra in her arms, her steps heavy. But when the airport lights illuminated the words printed on that little card, her heart nearly stopped. "Elijah Carter, CEO, Carter Holdings, President of Lyra Foundation." She read it again and again. It couldn't be a mistake. Elijah Carter, the tech billionaire, the man who had graced the cover of Forbes, who had funded scholarships for hundreds of single mothers, and the chairman of a charity named Lyra. She felt as if life had just played a cruel joke on her. Why would someone like him talk to her, hold her child, and sit through an entire flight beside someone like her? She clenched the card until it crumpled, her heart tightening in waves, like all the warmth from earlier had just been a cleverly veiled test, a live charity case, a polished form of pity. She turned back toward the gate. Elijah was still standing there. No bodyguards, no media entourage. Just him, as if waiting to be understood. "Why didn't you say something earlier? I don't think a business card defines a person." "Then who are you today? Elijah, the kind stranger, or Elijah Carter, the man who has the whole world at his feet?" Ariana's voice cracked, not from anger, but from pain. "I'm just a single mom. I don't need pity. I don't need a hero." Elijah looked at her, long and real. "You're wrong. You don't need a hero. But everyone deserves someone who stands beside them, without needing a reason." But Ariana couldn't listen anymore. She turned away. A single tear slid down Lyra's cheek, not because she felt insulted, but because for one fleeting moment she had almost believed that someone truly saw her. 1 week later, Ariana's small apartment is on the outskirts of the Bronx. Lyra had been running a fever for 3 days straight. Her eyes were red and glassy, her breathing shallow, as though every inhale had to push through a fog of delirium. Ariana had tried everything: fever reducers, warm compressors, virtual doctors. But Lyra refused to eat, refused to nurse, and cried without sound. Ariana held her tremblingly eyes locked on her phone screen. Her bank balance showed just $7. Not enough for an emergency call, not enough for a cab to the hospital. She sank to the floor, clutching her child like she was hanging on to the last fragile thread of a miracle, one she had once rejected, cast aside in pride, and was now paying for with the life of her tiny daughter. Her hands shook as she picked up the phone, hesitating fingers. Before she typed the number on the crumpled business card, the number of the man she had pushed away, the only person who had ever made her feel seen. The phone rang once. Elijah's voice came through without hesitation, without reproach, just a low breath, like he had always been waiting for her. "Lyra, high fever. I don't know what to do anymore." Her voice broke. Less than 30 minutes later, her front door flew open. Elijah appeared not in a suit, not in luxury labels, just a dark hoodie and arms that gently took Lyra without a word. He carried her to his private car, where a doctor was already waiting. Ariana sat in the back seat, clutching her daughter's hand, and wept like a child, not from fear, but because for the first time, when she fell apart, someone caught her. Without asking, "Did you even try hard enough?" In the ER, Elijah sat beside her. Ariana spoke through her sobs. "I'm sorry for pushing you away. I was afraid of being pitied. Afraid you were just doing something nice and then disappearing like everyone else." Elijah didn't reply with words. He simply placed his hand over hers, not tightly, not forcefully, just a quiet gesture full of meaning. "I'm here. And this time, I'm not going anywhere." And that was the moment, not dazzling, not fireworks, but warm like the first spring sunlight after a winter that had gone on too long. "Come again." Ariana could barely believe her ears as Elijah held out an elegant black gown, his invitation as casual as if he were asking her to lunch. "Tomorrow night, Waldorf Astoria. The gala celebrating 20 years of Carter Holdings. I want you to come with me." Ariana looked at the dress, then at him, then at herself. Hair still tousled from sleepless nights, chipped nail polish, and a mind cluttered with questions. "I don't belong there." Elijah smiled. "No one really belongs anywhere, but sometimes you have to show them that what they cast aside was the most valuable thing of all." The next night, Ariana stepped into the grand hall of the Waldorf Astoria, the same place that had once hosted her sister's wedding, where she had once been told, "Don't show up with that baby bump." But tonight, she returned, No bowed head, no apologies. She walked beside Elijah Carter, hand in hand with Lyra, in her arms, the softest, purest crown a mother could wear. The entire ballroom fell silent. Every eye turned to them like an earthquake, rippling through high society. Some recognized Ariana. Whispers flew, "Isn't that the waitress from that little bakery in Brooklyn?" Her sister, still in the same wedding gown style as that fateful day, stepped from the crowd, frozen as if a ghost had come back seeking justice. Ariana Hughes came with Elijah Carter. Ariana only smiled. No anger, no revenge. Just a serene, quiet smile. That silenced the entire room. Elijah took the stage. He didn't speak about finances, stocks, or company expansions as everyone expected. Instead, he said, "For the past 20 years, I've invested in hundreds of ventures. But there's one thing I failed to invest in sooner, a family I could proudly show to the world." Then he looked down at Ariana and Lyra, his eyes radiating unfiltered pride. "This is Ariana, the bravest woman I've ever known. And little Lyra, the reason I've come to understand that the most beautiful things often come from the smallest beginnings." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. The next morning, headlines flooded every platform. Elijah Carter reveals relationship with single mom, once rejected by her own family, baby Lyra, the little angel who melted a billionaire's heart. And Ariana's, the same one who had once looked down on her and said, "Don't embarrass the family," now sat in silence at a banquet table, swallowing every bitter word she had ever spoken. Ariana didn't need revenge. Her presence alone was the perfect answer. News of Elijah and Ariana exploded across every headline, but not everyone applauded. At Carter Holdings' headquarters, the atmosphere turned stormy. Shareholders grew uneasy. Old stories resurfaced, articles about Ariana's days, waiting tables at a struggling bakery, her bankruptcy filing, credit card debt lawsuits from when she was pregnant with Lyra. And the person who hurt Ariana most was none other than Vivian Carter, Elijah's mother. That afternoon, Ariana was invited to the Carter family estate. There was no tea, no greeting. Just a single envelope was placed before her. Inside was a blank check. Vivian looked up, speaking slowly. "You're a strong woman, I won't deny that. But strength won't help you survive in this world. Being a single mother is hard enough. You don't need the weight of our family on your back. Elijah needs a wife who matches him, not a charity case." Ariana looked down at the check, silent. Her hands trembled not from anger, but from a deep, numbing disappointment. "There was a time I had nothing but the child inside me. I don't need your money. I only ask to be treated like a human being." She stood and bowed politely. "Thank you for showing me that sometimes poverty doesn't live in bank accounts. It lives in how people judge others." That night, Elijah came home, but Ariana was gone. Only a letter remained. "I love you, but I can't let Lyra grow up caught between two worlds that will never accept each other. Live as you've always lived, with ideals, not with guilt. And if one day you want to be with me, not because I need you, but because you need me, I'll be where it all began, the little bakery in Brooklyn." Elijah read the letter, clenching it in his hands. But this time, he didn't stay silent. He didn't wait. He stood up and did what no Carter heir had ever dared. He renounced his inheritance, pulled all his shares from Carter Holdings, and made a public statement to the media, "I'm not choosing legacy. I'm choosing the woman who taught me the true value of family." On an autumn morning, the little bakery on the Brooklyn corner was filled with the scent of butter and cinnamon. Ariana wiped down the tables, her hands moving quickly as always, but her heart felt hollow. She never told anyone about turning Elijah down. She didn't complain, didn't blame. She simply lived and tried to love life as if she had never known loss. Lyra was different. The little girl would often ask Mommy, "Does Uncle Elijah still like my cookies?" Ariana would smile. "He'll always remember the taste of your cookies." And then, one afternoon, the neighborhood suddenly heard the sound of piano music coming from an old truck parked in front of the bakery. A small band began playing "You Are My Home." People stepped outside curiously, and Elijah Carter stepped down from the truck wearing a simple white shirt holding a box of cookies. He walked into the bakery, eyes locked on Ariana. No grand words, no speech. He simply knelt down, pulled out a ring. Not a dazzling diamond, but a simple silver band engraved with the word Lyra. "I don't need my father's forgiveness. I don't need my mother's approval. I just want to call you at home. My wife. The one who will build a family with me, one without judgment. The one who will teach our daughter that her mother is the strongest woman in the world." Ariana broke down in tears. The bakery went silent. An elderly customer quietly clapped. Then another joined, and then the entire neighborhood erupted in applause. Elijah slipped the ring onto her finger. Lyra wrapped her arms around him from behind, beaming with joy. But the surprises weren't over. A luxury car pulled up to the curb. Vivian Carter stepped out. No butler, no bodyguards. She walked straight into the bakery, her eyes on Ariana and Elijah. The room held its breath. She stopped in front of Ariana and pulled from her coat pocket the same check she had once offered, now torn to pieces. "I kept this to remind myself just how proud I once was." Then she placed a small hair clip on the counter. "It used to belong to Elijah when he was a baby. I want Lyra to have it, if you'll allow me." Ariana took her hand, no longer distant, no longer bitter, just healing. From the story of Ariana, Elijah, and little Lyra, we're reminded that kindness, even the quietest kind, has the power to shift an entire world that once seemed unchangeable. The deepest lesson here is this: you don't need wealth or fame to matter. Live with an honest heart, protect your dignity, and never abandon your compassion, and the light will find you sooner or later. Elijah gave up an empire to choose love. Ariana didn't need revenge to make those who looked down on her bow their heads. And Lyra, with her innocence and purity, became the bridge that healed hearts long broken. Personally, I believe that all of us have once been the Ariana of our own lives, looked down upon, left in the shadows, but if we refuse to give up on ourselves, we will one day step into the light. If this story moved you, please like and help share its message. Share it so that someone in despair might find new hope. And don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story so we can continue telling heartfelt stories where kindness, courage, and faith remain timeless values.